Ron Kenoly was born on December 6, 1944, and he passed away, from what I heard this morning, on February 3rd, 2026.
Ron Kenoly is being remembered across churches worldwide following his death, not only as a well-known gospel singer, but as a figure whose work permanently changed how modern praise and worship is practiced. His passing prompted renewed discussion within the Christian community about the scope of his influence, particularly the worship systems, service structures, and leadership standards he introduced that remain active in churches today. Kenoly's legacy is closely tied to the development of contemporary congregational worship as it exists in many churches now. Long before modern praise formats became widely accepted, he promoted a model built around participation, continuity, and shared responsibility. This approach moved worship away from limited leader-centered expression and toward collective involvement, a shift that later became standard practice across denominations. His influence extended beyond individual songs or recordings. Kenoly helped establish expectations for how worship should be planned, led, and sustained throughout an entire service. Rather than treating praise as a short opening element, he promoted extended worship designed around accessibility and repetition. These principles later became foundational in contemporary worship planning and leadership training. Ronald Kenneth Kenoly was born on December 6, 1944 in Coffeyville, Kansas. His early exposure to music was shaped by discipline and structure rather than experimentation. He approached music with focus and consistency, qualities that later defined his leadership style. However, his professional path did not initially point toward ministry. During the 1960s, Kenoly served in the United States Air Force, where he remained musically active while operating within a highly structured environment. Military service reinforced habits of preparation, accountability, and reliability. These habits later became central to his approach to worship leadership. Kenoly consistently emphasized that worship required discipline equal to its spiritual importance. After completing military service, Kenoly pursued secular music professionally, including rhythm and blues under the stage name Ron Keith. He recorded and performed during a period when commercial success appeared achievable. Industry exposure provided him with professional experience in recording and performance. However, this phase also led to internal reassessment. Kenoly later explained that he began questioning whether professional recognition alone fulfilled the purpose he believed music should serve. This reassessment resulted in a clear shift away from secular performance and toward Christian worship. Rather than abandoning musical professionalism, he redirected it toward ministry. He adopted a functional philosophy of worship music, viewing it as a tool for guiding congregational participation rather than showcasing individual talent. This belief shaped both his songwriting and leadership approach and became a defining feature of his ministry. Kenoly's influence expanded significantly during the 1980s when he became worship leader at Jubilee Christian Center in San Jose, California. At Jubilee, he implemented worship formats designed to sustain congregational engagement throughout services. Worship was structured as a continuous activity rather than a sequence of isolated musical moments. These services emphasized accessibility. Songs were selected based on ease of learning, repetition was applied deliberately, and transitions were structured to maintain participation. Choirs supported congregational singing rather than replacing it. This format differed from traditional worship structures and drew attention from visiting pastors and worship leaders. As recordings of Jubilee's worship services circulated, Kenoly's model began influencing churches beyond California. Worship leaders adopted similar service structures, incorporating extended praise segments and participatory formats into their own congregations. Over time, these practices became common across denominations and cultural contexts. The early 1990s marked a major expansion of Kenoly's influence through the release of live worship recordings. Albums such as Lift Him Up presented worship in its functional context rather than a studio-controlled environment. These recordings were widely used as instructional resources rather than entertainment-focused albums. Churches relied on these recordings to train worship teams, model service flow, and introduce congregational singing patterns. Their value lay in practical application rather than novelty. This approach contributed to their widespread and lasting adoption. Several songs associated with Kenoly became long-term fixtures in worship services worldwide. Titles such as Ancient of Days, Jesus is Alive, We Offer Praises, and God is Able were translated into multiple languages and incorporated across cultural and denominational boundaries. Their continued use reflected straightforward structure and biblical focus. Kenoly's songwriting avoided technical complexity. Melodies were designed for congregational ease, and lyrics emphasized scripture rather than abstract concepts. This approach allowed churches with limited musical resources to participate fully and contributed to the durability of his music across decades. Beyond songwriting, Kenoly's legacy includes his influence on worship leadership standards. He regularly addressed the responsibilities associated with leading worship, emphasizing humility, preparation, and accountability. He discouraged performance-driven approaches and warned against prioritizing visibility over responsibility. Through conferences, seminars, and mentoring, Kenoly influenced a broad network of worship leaders. His teaching shaped leadership development materials and training programs used by churches globally. Many leaders credited his instruction with defining their understanding of congregational worship leadership and ethical responsibility. Kenoly's impact extended internationally. His worship model and recordings were adopted by churches throughout Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe. In many regions, his materials served as reference points during the development of contemporary worship ministries, particularly where structured training resources were limited. His global acceptance was aided by adaptability. While musical styles varied across cultures, the core structure of participatory worship remained consistent. This balance allowed churches to apply his model without cultural conflict while maintaining theological alignment. As Kenoly grew older, he reduced involvement in large-scale public ministry. He shifted his focus toward teaching, writing, and private ministry, reflecting his emphasis on sustainability rather than continuous public exposure. This transition aligned with his long-standing teaching on longevity in leadership. Despite reduced visibility, his influence remained active. Churches continued using his recordings, and new worship leaders encountered his work through digital platforms, church training programs, and archived materials. His absence from public stages did not diminish his role within worship culture. Kenoly maintained a private personal life. He was married twice and had 3 sons. In later years, his priorities centered on family and maintaining balance. He avoided public attention unrelated to ministry and did not engage in celebrity-driven culture. Following his death, responses from worship communities emphasized continuity rather than loss. Tributes focused on the systems, practices, and leadership standards he helped establish. Many noted that his influence had already become embedded within worship services long before his passing. Churches honored his legacy by continuing to apply the worship structures he introduced. His music remained in regular use, and his leadership principles continued shaping worship training and ministry development. Ron Kenoly's legacy is defined by structural influence rather than personal recognition. He did not simply contribute songs, he helped redefine how worship operates at an organizational level. His work continues through practices that remain active across churches worldwide. Remembering Ron Kenoly means acknowledging a pioneer whose contributions became part of the foundation of modern worship. His impact endures through consistent application rather than symbolic tribute, reflected in the way worship is led, structured, and sustained in churches today.